When it comes to social media, I definitely social media is the organization of what it is right now is not is not efficient enough to kind of create the situations that I'm talking about, because it can force people into echo chambers because you friend and follow people. You have a certain algorithm where you're seeing very specific information that you want to see, and you don't want to see other information. You can mute and block people. It's not a genuine human interaction at the end of the day. And I think things that Twitter, as of right now, if Elon Musk eventually creates the platform so it's owned by the people, and makes it a perfect public square, you shouldn't have situations where you can just like put yourself in an echo chamber and not communicate with the rest of the world. That's not productive, and that just creates the opposite effect
Mhm.
at the end of the day. So social media still needs a lot of work on how they would go about that. I'd be also very curious on how they kind of do things when it comes to virtual reality, because I think it's a different step. But if they have the same issues as social media, then it would not do anything in the long run. So
Yeah.
basically, how I see it is the best way to kind of go about this is that one, there's like different potential solutions that I believe could be put in effect, but they are obviously going to be very difficult. So it's going to be a long process. The first thing I would say is that public education, especially for the youth, should incentivize more field trips. I know it's crazy. Field trips, how are field trips going to help people? Well, field trips, what they provide, obviously, it's a fun time to not be in class, right? But also, especially if these field trips are funded properly and you get the actually like explore places, there's a perfect opportunity for kids to interact with different kids. It's a perfect opportunity to kids to learn a different culture. It's the perfect opportunity for them to grow their perspective and grow their mindset. And those frequent occurrences, because I do think it should be relatively frequent. Now, obviously not all the time because you only have so much resources, but that comes into my dismissal of the current public education system being extremely inefficient and not doing as much as it should be. But with that said, that's just one potential solution, because it starts when you're a kid. That's when it starts. It starts when you're a kid and you're getting fed certain things, whether it's from your parents or from your community. And once you start stepping outside of that, that's when you start growing in terms of your mindset, and you start thinking a little bit more and realizing that, oh yeah, there's a bigger world than where I am at currently. A good example of this was I watched a movie recently called Freedom Riders. I believe that was the movie, and that was a very good movie. It was a teacher, and it was based on a true story, and they actually have an organization that's currently existing. And the teacher in the movie was a fresh teacher. She came to teach at a high school, I think ninth, 10th grade maybe, and she's teaching these students. Now she was put in the class of, you know, troubled kids who were, and these in the school had a program where now it was like a, you know, suburban-ish school before, and then they had a program bringing in a lot of kids from the poor communities. So her class was full of troubled kids that go through a lot of bad circumstances, that go through gang life, that all they see is violence and all they think is violence, and that none of this matters. The teacher took a conservative effort to obviously be very involved with their students, but also take them out into field trips. And the value of them just going to a Holocaust museum changed the mindset of these students dramatically as they learn that it's bigger than what I am currently. So people don't undervalue the power of field trips, because they could obviously grow your perspective, especially at a young age, which is very important. And
Mhm.
another aspect that is more culturally and not necessarily a policy thing that you can implement is that parents have to be willing to incentivize their children to grow. So I had another podcast episode where we talked about the role of parents in society. And the three things that he mentioned that we already kind of agreed with is that you should incentivize your children to, have critical thinking so they're not automatically funneled into a certain way of thinking. Have them experience life, and even if you're poor, you can definitely, there's still things you can do for them to experience different cultures, that experience different perspectives. I mean, that's your role as a parent at the end of the day, to grow your child. And the last thing is, well, he believes that he should, have a certain humanitarian aspect to kind of care about people, which is also very important too. So the parents' role in growing their children should also be a very important aspect in growing their perspective and experience and critical thinking. So, it obviously, when it comes down to it, it starts young, and it's very possible to do. I don't think it's hard things to do. It's just people need to be willing to take that extra step to do these things. And when it comes tough is when they're older. And when they're older, it becomes much harder to convince someone to exit out a frame of thinking. And these
Mhm.
people, these individuals, uh, I don't really have a perfect solution on how to convince these people. The only thing I can say about these is where I implore to other people who listen to the podcast is that you, as an individual who already have this type of thinking, have to be willing to be understanding and being willing to converse with people. For
Mm.
me personally, one thing that I am considering on my podcast, and I've grown into this mindset, is I have to be willing to have people on my show and converse with people I don't like and I do not agree with in any step of the word. But by doing that, I'll be able to understand what their point of view is, converse, maybe potentially change their mind, but at the very least, they have a certain type of thinking, and this is valuable. Someone that doesn't agree with me was willing to listen to me. And that piece right there, that piece, if it hits their mind, is another valuable piece that could either flourish or at the very least they can spread it to other people and that could flourish. So there's
Mm.
there's definitely potential things you can do.